had Jeff Fairholm booked in here for a while, but to my favorite all-time Rough Rider, two-time Grey Cup champion, Jeff Fairholm joining us today to talk a little CFL ball out there in the West. Fairway, good to see you. I'm going to jump right into it. If you don't mind, some pretty good matchups this weekend. Montreal at Toronto, the East Final. BC at Winnipeg, West Final. Who do you think advances to the Grey Cup in Hamilton?
Deja vu all over again, huh? Let's, I don't know. At the risk of going against, I don't know. I don't really know what's going to happen. I think Toronto's going to beat Montreal pretty handily, but I'm going to actually take BC over Winnipeg, just to go against the grain a little bit. I think they're playing really well. If they can, depending what the weather's like, I haven't looked what the weather's going to be like, but I'm going to take BC as an upset.
They're saying +2 in Winnipeg and decent. I mean, you've been through the wars. And I got to be honest, dude, you were on the 89 Riders. Just jarred in my mind. That upset the 16-2 Edmonton Eskimos. Are you in the West Final? Are you getting any feels of that particular weekend in this East Final? The 16-2 Argos, another former team of yours?
Yeah, I always do at this time of year, actually. Whenever we get into the playoffs, my I don't know what it is. I get tingles all the time. So it's kind of fun when the playoffs start because it's such a great time of year. It's just, CFL all over the place. And, when we played in the 89 semi and then the final, of course, beating a 16-2 team, it was obviously very special. And then beating Hamilton and arguably the best Grey Cup game in history. It's something that I'll never forget. And I hope these players really value that, these chances don't come around very often. And, if BC goes into Winnipeg and loses again, they're going to have to make changes, obviously, because they can't wait for Winnipeg to get older. Montreal is going to have it, really tough. I think Toronto is ready for them. I haven't heard anything like we heard in '89 going into Edmonton, where there were a couple of players that said we were sheep going to slaughter and things like that, which you don't want to put that kind of stuff on anyone's bulletin board. But I haven't heard any of that coming from Toronto. I know they have a tremendous culture in the locker room. Look at how many people they're signing early, coaches and players, and I just it would take a miracle for Montreal to do anything against Toronto.
They have assembled a super team over there in Toronto. And you're right. The only difference between this bunch and the 89 Eskimos is they have shut their yap and just gone out and humbly done their business. But if I may, why not, man? What do you remember about that snowy Sunday in Edmonton and why you guys were able to, why David beat Goliath that day?
Well, we were 9-9, and I think we had a culture and a team that just didn't falter. We had a lot of adversity during that year that caused us to be 9-9, and we never got down on each other. Our locker room was very, very tight. We had a locker room, even though we had some tremendous coaches, we had a locker room that just didn't let anything happen. We had a good mix of young and old, and we just believed that we could go in there and do it. We were one of the only teams that beat Edmonton during that year. So we had that in our back pocket. And, being one of those two teams, we felt like we could do it. And, we had a tremendous game plan. I mean, our defensive game plan, people forget, but we blitzed the heck out of Tracy Ham, and they didn't have an answer for us. And then offensively, we studied a lot of film, and we had a great game plan going in where, especially on those in and out coverages and things, we had a great game plan for Ray and I to be able to get inside out or outside in on them. So that's how we scored those touchdowns. So, it was just great game planning, and, we worked hard. And we believed we had a tight locker room.
It's funny. I had Rocky DiPietro on a couple of weeks ago. You may or may not know he is the CFL Alumni of the Year, along with Leo Ezrins. Yeah. And I said to Rocky, was that '89 Grey Cup the best ever? Because he was in it for Hamilton, and he's like, "Yeah, I think it was." Somebody's got to lose. It was very classy of him the way that he answered that. I know that I couldn't pull it off that way. If you were hiring the next head coach of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who would you be hiring, Jeff Fairholm?
Well, I think it's got to be someone safe. I don't think Jo can go off off and take a chance on anybody. I've heard a lot of names being bantered about, and I just don't think that a first-time head coach would be the play right now. I think bringing people like Henry Burris up, and I think that's a great idea in time, but I just don't think it's right for the Saskatchewan Roughriders right now. I think they need to go with someone who's relatively safe, and I think the guy in Toronto or the guy in Hamilton is probably the number one pick, and then from there I would sort of ease down into some offensive coordinators. Or defensive coordinators who have really paid their dues, who might be ready for a chance. But I'm hoping for the safe pick.
And that's Milanovic. Let's say that he gets offered the world to stay in Hamilton, and this is just you and me shooting the breeze, man. I'm not going to hold you to any of it, but let's just say he's not available. Who's your next guy? And the reason I say that is Paul LaPolice. He's a close personal friend of mine, and I can't separate my heart and my head. That's why I'm not in a management role hiring anybody. But I think it's bunk when they say he's been fired twice, because two things stick out to me on that. Number one, maybe he's learned something. And number two, the teams weren't very good in both places. I don't think that should preclude him from ever being a head coach again. But maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I think Lapo's great, and I love Lapo. He and I coached together in Toronto, and we're friends as well. And he hasn't been mentioned. I haven't heard his name a lot, so maybe he's not sticking his name in the ring. Maybe he's taking another year off to work with TSN. But I think he'd be great. I mean, but you have to remember, we're in a rebuild. We weren't a very good team for 2 years either. So does he really want to take a team like that? But where else are you going to get an opportunity to be a head coach? He's been in Regina. He knows it. I would call him a small town guy as well. He knows what the bubble is like there. I think he'd be great. I think he should be on the list. He should be interviewed for sure, without question.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. And the other thing is he knows the market. I don't think Scott Milanovic does. Yeah. As a matter of fact, last I knew, Lapo had a house in Regina. He was renting it. He's a very wise businessman, too. And you, of all people, must agree. You need to know that market, because if you don't know what you're walking into, it would take you a year to figure it out.
Absolutely. And I hope one thing that the Riders do is I hope they hire a coach that they mandate and they say you have to stay in Regina in the off season. This flying coaches in and out, I just don't think it works. And especially in a market like Saskatchewan, I think you need someone who's going to stay there, help market the team, help market, what his plans are and things like that. So I hope they go that route, and Lapo would probably be that guy. He'd probably stay in town. I would mandate that if I was JL for sure.
I agree, but you also know, as someone who knows it as well as me, you win, you could live on the moon. They wouldn't care. You just need to win. Right?
Yeah, but I think you need to have, it's a community-owned team. Let's remember, right? And then that. I mean, you live there. I think it's super important to have the coach and as many coaches as you can and players to stay around in the off-season market. It's just what I think. It's what I would do if I was Jo. But it's a bubble, and it's tough. And yeah, you can win, but sooner or later you're going to lose. And I think you might buy yourself a year or two if you ingrain yourself in the community. But you're right. It's a tough place to play. It's like being a Maple Leaf in Toronto. It's obviously on a smaller scale, but it's the same idea. And anybody that goes in there is going to have their eyes wide open because again, this team is not very good, and they have a lot of changes to make, especially within the locker room culture, as I've mentioned on past shows.
Yeah, well, I agree with all those things. Been saying it for a long time. But I'm sitting here in South Florida. They clearly don't agree. So we'll see. We'll see who they hire. Fairway, thanks for this. Enjoy the Grey Cup, and let's do it again soon.
Look forward to it, Rod. Enjoy South Florida. It sounds awesome.
Thank you, my man. The great number 18 slot back Jeff Fairholm, two-time Grey Cup champion.